أنت ربي ذو الجلال والإكرام يا إلهي.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah. So we're here just to for the next 13 or 14 weeks or so to discuss Imam Nawawi's Arba'in Hadith. What is that? Why? We have two sources of learning in our deen, right? There's the Quran, which is the that he collected over 500,000 hadith. The Prophet said anything he did or anything that occurred in front of him, right? And people saw his reaction to it. Imam Nawawi was a polymath in his own right, a scholar, a jurist. And he wanted to gather some of the strongest, most hadith. But he said, the average Muslim, they know their Quran. But the average Muslim has not gone through the whole corpus of hadith, right? They've not gone through all of Bukhari, all of Muslim, right? And much of the language in these ahadith, much of the imagery, much difficult for most Muslims too. So Imam Nawawi's goal, most prominent ahadith that were in Imam Bukhari and Imam, and he called that al-arba'in, the 40, right? And he said, okay, now I've looked at all of the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim. I know what every single hadith says, and I know that these 40, it's actually about 42, but they represent the entire corpus of hadith that's out there, right? So, it gained some sense of acceptance in the Muslim ummah. Now, this is about 700, 800 years ago when it was written, right? But many, many years after that, and for years to come, many continuously writing commentaries on these 40 ahadith, right? And this is by a person named Ibn Rajab, who was about a 13th, 14th century, born in the month of Rajab. A Hanbali scholar who wrote his commentary, Jam' Ulum wal Hikam, which is a commentary on it's a classical commentary on Arba'in Nawawiyah. And I'm going to use their commentary. There are many, many commentaries. And I'll be dipping into some of them here and there, but these are the two main. What is our goal? Our goal is to really gain a strong fundamental usul of our deen. What does usul mean? Right? Foundation, right? That's what this course is called, foundation. We want a foundation in three things. One, Islam. What is Islam? What does it mean to be a Muslim? Right? What does it mean to practice Islam? What does it mean to articulate that practice, especially in America, right? And how do these classical ahadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ help us understand it? What is Iman? Iman, faith. What is faith? What does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to say you're a faithful person, right? To say you're a believer. What do you believe in? What is it that you believe in that made you a believer? Or are you just saying you believe? What is Ihsan? Beauty, perfection in worship. What is it like, right? Why is that important? How do we achieve that? How do we get there, okay? So these three things, Islam, Iman, Ihsan, is what we're going to focus on. We're not going to go linearly, where we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Rather, the first few weeks, I would say 4 to 5 weeks, right? Maybe first 4 weeks or so. We're going to know Nawawi's Arba'in that talk about Islam in general, okay? And they're scattered, but they're focused on the concept of Islam. Next 4 weeks or so after that, we're going to talk about all of the hadith that focus, which are scattered, right? It's not linear, right? As defined by the Prophet Muhammad. 4 weeks or so of the course, we're going to talk about all of the hadith that talk about Ihsan in the second hadith. And so we're going to take somewhat of a thematic approach to Imam Nawawi's Arba'in. In the end result, thematically, right, and we like to think So don't tell me what pedagogy means, right? Pedagogy is the science of learning. For? Okay, let's jump into it. So the first hadith, we're going to start in hadith. After that, it's not going to be linear, okay? The first hadith is a hadith that essentially actions are by intention. We mean only by intentions. And not by anything else, right? Now let me ask you a question. In the English language, if I say actions are by intentions, does that sound like a normal sentence? Not right. What if I said cars are by engines? Doesn't quite make sense, right? What if I said people are by clothes that they wear? Doesn't quite make sense, right? What's missing in English? Who here is good at English grammar? No one, I'm sure. Right? It's like the subject everyone hates, right? The thing that's missing here is a predicate, right? Or a khabar in the Arabic language, okay? And in the Arabic language, it's very common to omit the, like you wouldn't say cars by their engines, you would say cars are known by their engines, right? Or you say people are recognized by their clothes, right? Known, recognized, that's like the predicate of the sentence, right? But in the Arabic language, it's very common to omit that. Why? You omit that when either one, it's well known what you're trying to say, or there are multiple things you could plug in into that place, right? And there are multiple potential khabars or predicate you could plug in here. Because you could really say, indeed, verily, actions are considered via their intentions. That's one possibility. Mu'tabira. Or you could say, actions are correct because of their intentions. Sahih. Or you could say, actions are accepted because of intentions. These are three possibilities that the scholars talk about, right? Maqbula. So let's talk about each one of these, because this kind of takes us now into how we understand the idea of intentions as a Muslim, and how we make intentions, why we make intentions, where intentions come into play in our daily lives, okay? Right? So let's talk about the first one, mu'tabira. Actions are considered. This is one possibility of how to fill in the blank of the predicate, right? Actions are considered. So your actions on a daily basis can be mu'tabira or ghayru mu'tabira, i.e. they can be considered having spiritual value or considered having no spiritual value, okay? So for example, if I want to eat an apple, what's the reward for eating an apple? Vitamin, okay. There's no reward for eating an apple, right? Right? Okay, what about French press coffee? Keep you up. Keep me up. But what's the spiritual reward of French press coffee? As opposed to a V60. Y'all not into coffee. Right? Okay. What about what's the reward of, someone help me out, X pair of jeans versus Y pair of jeans. All of this is considered mubah. And in Sharia, it's considered what? غَيْرُ مُعْتَبِرًا. There's no hukum. There's no ruling. You do whatever you want, right? As long as it's not haram, right? So it's essentially, it has no spiritual value. Unless, what? You apply an intention to it. What's the reward for sleeping? There's no reward for sleeping, right? You just wasted 8 hours. Right? There's no reward. But what if you said, no, I'm going to go to sleep because I want to rejuvenate my body and I want to increase my health and I want to increase my energy so I can be a better person and I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I can do good tomorrow. Now, what if you went to sleep with that intention, right? Okay, now what you've done is taken something that is not considered and you made it now something that's considered. Something that is غَيْرُ مُعْتَبِرًا and now it's mu'tabira. Something that had no value and now you've given it value, right? Something that had no reward and now you've given it reward. And what was needed to do that? Just a slight effort of consciousness and intention. right? And this is why the believer lives intentionally, right? This is the importance of living intentionally. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, I did not create mankind or jinn except to worship me. That means your entire day is supposed to be able to fall under that category. Fresh pressed coffee has no value, right? But if I'm drinking coffee and I have the intention, right? I have some good intention behind that, right? Because I want to increase my nishat, my alertness or something to do something good, right? Or I'm buying some set of clothing, jeans or whatever, and I'm paying attention to the modesty aspect of it, to clothe myself with the clothing of taqwa, right? وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. And I'm applying that intention, right? Now I'm being rewarded for that. Now I'm living my life with some sense of purpose. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not even tie his shoe except that he would ask Allah for help. That's living intentionally. That is living intentionally. He would not even tie his shoe except that he would seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in doing that. He would not look in the mirror. What's the reward for looking in the mirror? No reward for looking in the mirror, right? But when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would look in the mirror, he would make an intention. And he would say, Allahumma kama ahsanta khalqi fa ahsin khuluqi. As you have perfected my outer character, so perfect my inner character, right? What's the reward for putting on a shirt? It's غير معتبرة. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would apply an intention to it. And he would say, he would make a dua every time he would put on a new shirt. And he would be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he would ask him, as this wears out, give me a new shirt, or kama qala sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He would apply an intention to everything that he would do, right? So one of the predicates that we can fill in there is taking something and making it considered. Like actions now only become considered, right? But now these are actions that are outside of ritualistic worship, okay? What about actual acts of worship? Prayer, charity, right? Zakat, right? Then we don't say mu'tabira, ghayru mu'tabira, considered or not considered. No. We use a different term. We say sahih. Indeed, actions are sahih or not sahih by their intentions. What does sahih mean? One of our youth. Come on, give me something. Sahih. Authentic, good. What's another translation of sahih? Correct, right? Another translation of sahih is correct. Okay, so your actions, when it comes to worship now, okay, so this is a whole different set of actions. We're not talking about eating apples, putting on jeans, drinking French press coffee, so on and so forth. Now we're talking about going into the dhuhr prayer, okay? Now we're talking about making wudu, all right? We're talking about specific rituals, okay? Now you can't have a general intention, okay? You have to have a specific intention. And you have to bring that intention with you in every single act of worship that you do, okay? Now the ulama differ about, well, how specific do you need to be? Like according to Imam Shafi'i, the minute you take your hands up for takbirul ihram, for the prayer, right? You've got to have an intention for that prayer, right there. Otherwise it's not accepted. It's not sahih, right? Other imams, like Imam Malik, he will say no. As long as you had that intention at some point leading up to that action, and you were walking to prayer as a result of that, and you were getting, even if you didn't have it right at that moment, it's still considered authentic. Some differences of opinion. But that's another way of looking at the idea of intention, right? And then finally, maqbula, accepted. Actions are only accepted, right, by intentions. Why? Because sometimes we're not like eating an apple or praying salat al-dhuhr, but we're doing something like this. Just a general effort. Sometimes you're making a general effort and there's no particular way in which the Prophet did it, right? It might be a volunteer effort. It might be doing a certain halaqah, right? It might be giving some kind of general charity or something like that, right? And in that case, what you're doing is you just want the action to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what you're doing there is you simply are seeking Allah, right? You are seeking Allah. In fact, the word niyyah that's used in this hadith is the single point in the entire Quran. Can someone give me an ayah where the word niyyah is used in the Quran? I know there's some hufaz here. an ayah. Any ayah where the using it. It's not. Because the Quran uses another yuriduna wajhullah. Right? Yabtaghuna wajhullah. Right? People who are seeking the face of Allah. People who are wanting, right, the closeness of Allah, mind to do something good, right? Rather, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's a sense, it's a desire that we have. Like, what do you want as a Muslim? Like, what do you want? What's your goal? Like, what do you want? That's the general thing that they want. And sometimes, that's the thing you need to be looking at, right? And in all these things, the ulama, they say there are a couple things you need to pay attention to when it comes to intention. One, right, and we'll talk about all these. And then there is tajdidun niyyah, all right? So there is the making of an intention, right? And this can be something, this is just sporadic. This is how we're created as human beings. No one knows what the genetic code for an intention is, right? There's no genetic code for intention. It's just how we're created. Sometimes we just intend things. It just comes about, right? But when that happens, it can be mixed with a lot of bad intentions as well. And this is why you need something called takhlisun niyyah. You have to purify your intention, right? You have to remove it from all of its impurities. What are the impurities that can come with an intention? What are the things that can make an intention impure? Because you just intended to do something just for the sake of Allah, right? But then what makes it impure? What makes it less than acceptable in the sight of Allah? What if a person has an intention to be seen? What if a person has an intention to be known in addition to what they're doing, right? What if a person has an intention to be recognized and to be famous, right? All of these things take away from the purity of your intention, right? So when you make an intention to do something for the sake of Allah, you have to realize you're making an intention, shaitan's going to throw something in there as well, right? He's going to say, mashallah, you know, somebody's going to see you, right? And they're going to think you're such a pious person, right? And that's going to make you energized. You know, there's different levels to this. The ulama, they say, you may start out with a prayer and your intention was pure, right? But then once people see you, it may shift. You know? Because then people saw you. So now your intention is you want to impress that person. Or it may not shift once people see you, right? But then you may feel energized. Like that just gave you a little bit of energy, right? And that again ruins your intention a little bit. Or maybe you just feel like they owe you some respect. Because here you are doing a good deed, right? And even that is this is what's called riyā, right? That's the minor shirk, right? All of this corrupts the intention. So you need to have takhlisun niyyah. You gotta consciously observe these things within yourself. And consciously remove these things one by one. There's a metaphor in the Quran given about this. And it has to do with milk. Believe it or not. It's interesting, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَنْعَامِ لَعِبْرَةً. You have in cattle an example, right? مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ لَبَنًا خَالِصًا سَائِغًا لِلشَّارِبِينَ. Right? You have, like cows, what do cows do? They produce milk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, between everything in their digestive tract, which is fecal matter, which is what? Najis, right? And everything in their circulatory system, which is blood, which is najis, right? Between these two things, right, what comes out? Laban khalis, pure milk, right? How does that happen? Because in the body of the cow, it slowly extracts from these two things only the pure components within the digestive system and only the pure components within the blood, and leaves behind everything else that's impure until only khalis, the same word for ikhlas, pure milk comes out, right? And when we make an intention, a similar thing has to happen. It's all kinds of impurities are thrown in there, right? Because you want someone to see you, you want someone to respect you, right? You have this, you have this reputation to uphold, right? And these are all like the najis that has to be removed from the milk, right? And you have to consciously remove them one by one until it's purely for Allah, right? Now the last thing about intention, we'll say before we finish the rest of the hadith, is that oftentimes as Muslims, and this is how, especially as young Muslims who grow up in America, we're focused on the what of the intention, Okay? What do I mean by that? Okay? All right? Like the first thing we talked about, like, having a general intention towards everything that you. So this is what I'm going to intend. I'm going to intend to buy pious clothing. Okay? Not just clothing. I'm going to intend to sleep so I have more energy for worship. Or I'm going to intend to pray dhuhr 4 rakats. Or I'm going to intend to do some good by organizing this picnic so Muslims get together and meet each other. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "At'imu ta'am wa afshu salam," feed each other, give salam. This is my intention. All these are good intentions, they're acceptable intentions. But they all fall under what? What? This is what you're intending. Okay? But there's another part of intention that's very important, and that is the who. Who are you doing this for? Right? Are you doing this for your parents? Are you doing this for the community, for your reputation within the community? Or are you doing this for Allah and only for Allah? And it's hard to do something for someone if you don't know who they are. Like if I tell you right now, there's a guy down the street, his name is Bob. I want you to go buy a gift for Bob. What's your first answer going to be? Who's Bob? Right? I'm saying, Bob's this dude. He's 30 years old, Go buy a gift for Bob. Then what are you going to say? You still want to know about Bob, right? You can't buy him a gift unless you know who he is, right? You can't do something for someone unless you know who they are. Right? Ta'ala Allahu amma yasifun. We're not making a metaphor for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in order to have the who, right? Your Islam can't just be a list of do's and don'ts. You have to know who Allah is. This is key to living intentionally as a Muslim. You have to know who you're doing this for. Who is Ar-Rahman? When you're doing a deed of mercy and you're intending you have to know who Ar-Rahman is, right? Who is Al-Malik, the king, the sovereign? When you're trying to be sovereign over your own body and control yourself, you have to know who Al-Malik is. You have to know who As-Salam is. When you're intending to give peace to someone, right? You have to know who Allah is. You have to know who you're doing this for. It's not enough just to know the what of Islam. You have to know who you're doing it for. Right? And so this becomes a very important part of living intentionally. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he continues and he says, whoever's hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger, then it's for Allah and His Messenger. And whoever's for dunya or a woman to marry, then it's for that. This is because of a man from Banu Luhay who wanted to marry a woman called Qais in Medina. And as the Muslims were migrating to Medina, he also migrated with everyone else. But they knew why he was migrating. He was migrating to marry this woman. So they asked the Prophet, what about this guy? He's also migrating. And the Prophet Muhammad says, no. It doesn't matter what the outward action is. The inward intention is ultimately what makes it acceptable, authentic or correct, right? Or something that is considered, right? So this is the most fundamental hadith of our deen, right? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, right? And there's so much emphasis of this in our deen. It's just living intent. And this is how you start. This is how you start on the spiritual path as a Muslim. You just begin to have intention. Just for mundane things. Just try it. Watch how much more happy you are as you do that thing, right? No matter what it is, you can form some good intention about it, right? And it makes you live with a sense of purpose. It makes you live with a sense of reflection of who the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was. One of the famous scholars, he said, if I was to write a book and put X many chapters in it, at the beginning of every chapter I would put this hadith, because this is the foundation of it. Imam Bukhari put this as the first hadith in his book, right? Imam Shafi'i said this is 1/3 of deen. This hadith is 1/3 of deen. He said, لأن الدين الإسلام أعمال والأعمال يكون باللسان أو بالجوارح باللسان أو بالقلب فنية بالقلب أحد أقسام ثلاثة. He said your actions in Islam, it's either something you do with your limbs, it's something you say with your tongue, or something you intend with your heart. So intention is 1/3. It's 1/3 of the religion, right? So it's extremely important to constantly, in addition to that, constantly revive our intention. Our intention dies out. We start with something good, we start with a good intention, right? But then things get mixed in, and we have to purify that like we talked about, right? But then we have to revive it. Tajdeed, just like you revive your faith, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that's tajdeedul kalima tayyibah, right? Tajdeedul Iman, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasul. You have to have tajdeedul niyyah. You have to revive your intention. You have to renew your intention in anything good that you were wanting to do. So let's talk about the second hadith. Any questions about that? So the second hadith is also narrated by Umar radiallahu anhu. And he's depicting a situation now in Medina. The Muslims are now in Medina, right? And they're sitting around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is oftentimes how they would learn, right? They would sit around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet would be teaching them, and they would sit in a circle, right? If someone wanted to come and join the circle, then they would come and join the circle, so on and so forth, right? And Umar radiallahu anhu, he begins the hadith by saying, بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذ طلع علينا رجل شديد بياد الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد. Then one day we were sitting around the Prophet Muhammad, just, imagine some quiet place in Medina, in the city, palm trees, sand, desert, everything, right? They're sitting around the Prophet, he's teaching them, they're talking. All of a sudden, he says, a man approaches us. And he describes him with these two characteristics. He says he's extremely white in his clothing and extremely black in his hair. Now, why would Umar describe him that way? First of all, thiyab is very symbolic in the Arabic language. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, right? Your clothing purify, right? The ulama of tafsir, they've mentioned 6 to 10 different interpretations of what the word thiyab means. Some of them said thiyab means clothing, just like clothing. Some of them says it means your loyalty, right? Some of them says it means your spouse. Some of them says it means your heart, purify your heart, right? Purify your nafs, right? It can mean so many different. This is why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, right, in a hadith, Allahumma, he makes a dua, naqini naqini min oh Allah, purify my clothing, naqini min al-khataya bil-ma'i wa-thalji wal-baradi. Purify me from mistakes with water, ice, and snow. كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس, as you purify a white piece of clothing, a thobe, from impurity. So the idea of a white, pure clothing, right, is very symbolic in our deen. In fact, one time a person had a dream, they saw Umar in a long piece of clothing, right? And they asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ what that means. He said, "That Iman, that's faith. That's the faith of Umar." So that's what the meaning of that dream is, right? And so it's symbolic, but from a more practical sense, right? What he's saying is that this doesn't make sense. He says, we don't see any sign of travel on him because this is in the desert, right? So if you're walking in the desert, right, and no one knows you, you must be a traveler. Because he says, none of us knew who this guy was. I mean, he must be a traveler. But if you're a traveler, you must have some sand in your hair, right? You must have some disheveled appearance, right? And he's saying his hair was very black, meaning there's no sign of a disheveled appearance. And his clothing was very white. You should have some stains in your clothes, right, if you're a traveler. So Umar is saying, immediately this guy caught our eye, right? وَلَا يَعْرِفُ مِنَّا أَحَدٍ حَتَّى جَلَسَ إِلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Then he came right in and he sat right up to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, this catches everyone's eye, right? Because no one knows who this person is, right? And then he sat, and the way he sat is فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ. So he sat like this. He put his thighs right like this in front of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's thighs, and he sat like this, right? وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. And he took his two palms, right? كَفَّيْ. وَوَضَعَ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ. And he put it on
the Prophet's thighs like this, which is the position of receptivity, right? This is adab. This is adab qabla al-ilm. You have to have etiquette before you have knowledge. And this person, whoever he is at this point, we don't know who he is in this hadith, is teaching the Muslims around the Prophet Muhammad, the Sahaba around the Prophet Muhammad, he's teaching them this fact, right? He's teaching them this fact that you have to have etiquette if you want to learn. If you want to learn, you have to have etiquette. You have to have adab. Imam Malik, subhanAllah, just reminds me of this narration about Imam Malik that Imam Ghazali talks about his Ihya Ulumuddin. إِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يَتَحَدَّث, right? If he wanted to teach hadith, he would tawadda, he would make wudu, وَاسْتَعْمَلَ الطِّيبِ, and then he would put on perfume, right? وَصَرَّحَ بِلِحْيَتِهِ, and he would comb his beard, right? وَجَلَسَ عَلَى صَدْرِ فَرَاشِهِ, and he would go and sit at the very front part of his carpet that he was sitting on. وَتَمَكَّنَ بِوَقَارٍ, and he would sit like with dignity, right? He would sit with dignity, right? And then he would begin to teach hadith. ثُمَّ سُئِلَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ. Then they asked Imam Malik, why do you do all this? He said, أُرِيدُ أَنْ أُعَظِّمْ حَدِيثَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. I want to show my tremendous respect for the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the adab that he had. Imam Malik used to say, al-adab qabla al-ilm, right? This is what he learned from his teacher, right? That adab has to come before knowledge. And this is now, well, we talked about pedagogy earlier. This is pedagogy, right? It's also an interesting technique in pedagogy that we know now, which is if you create a scene, if you create some kind of scene, okay, any kind of scene, whatever you say at that moment, people are much more likely to remember than if you had not created a scene. Anyone here familiar with Geico commercials? Right? You've seen these Geico commercials. It's on like every other commercial, right? It's a Geico commercial, right? What do Geico commercials do?
Got a little laser.
Yeah, they're just ridiculous commercials. All they do is create a scene, right? This guy lifting weights, and the next scene he's like twice as big. Next scene he's like the Incredible Hulk, right? And it's just random, bunch of like, but it catches your eye, right? And because of that, you remember what the commercial says at the end, right? You save up to 15% or so with it. It's not a bunch of bozos sitting in some office coming up with these random commercials. This has been proven through science. They know exactly what they're doing. You've got to create a scene. If you create some kind of scene, right, people are much more likely to remember what you're about to say, right? Because it becomes more memorable, right? And so this is actually in the science of pedagogy. Now, like they teach you, like if you give PowerPoint presentations, your PowerPoint presentations, right, if the color on the PowerPoint presentation is the wrong color, people just look away. They're not even going to read the rest of it, right? But if there's something about the picture or the presentation or something that catches your eye, then the few words that are on there, right, are much more likely to be remembered. So he sits like this, right? وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ, and he puts his hands on his two thighs, right? He says, أَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ, tell me about Islam, right? Tell me about Islam. Now the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he doesn't go talking about politics, right? And about this government and that government, right? And he doesn't go talking about, how there's oppression here and there's not oppression here and this and that. Very, very simple, very, very basic. Al-Islam an tashhada an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa tuqimu salah wa tu'ti az-zakah wa tasuma Ramadan wa tahujj al-bayt in istata'ta ilayhi sabila. Right? Islam is that you bear witness, no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger, right? And that you pray, you establish the prayer. Let's talk about those words here in a second, okay? You give the charity, you fast the fast of Ramadan, and you make Hajj if you're able to. Istata'a is two things, health and wealth. Istata'a is two things, health and wealth. You have the health to make Hajj, right? You're physically able to make Hajj, and you have the wealth to do it as well. If you have those two things, the burden is upon you to make Hajj, okay? Notice, first of all, the Prophet Muhammad keeps it the bare minimum. When we have people who come into our deen, right? It's subhanAllah, it's like the first thing we want to do, they got to change their name, change their diet, right? We want to give them a whole list of all kinds of ingredients that are in some wrapped package of this food bought at that store that's haram that they can no longer eat, right? And we want to give them all the minute details of wudu and everything like that, and we overwhelm people, right? The Bedouins who came to the Prophet, the most simple people, right? They just want to know what is Islam. Just give me and this is what we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks when we talk about all the hadith that deal with the basics of Islam. They're always the bare minimum. Always the bare minimum, right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ doesn't complicate things. And when we talk to people about Islam, don't complicate things, right? And when you're trying to understand what Islam is, don't complicate things. Start here. And where is here? What is here? First of all, notice that every single term that's being used in this hadith, okay, to describe the pillars is, so look at this. Bear witness. Is that a verb or a noun? It's a verb, right? Establish. Is that a verb or a noun? Verb, okay? Give. Is that a verb or a noun? Go. Verb or a noun? Islam is a deen of action. This is a deen of doing, right? It's not simply something you believe in the corner of your room, in your home, in some private affair. No, this is something you do, and it encompasses your entire day, right? It encompasses your entire life. This is something that differentiates us from Christianity. What happened in Christianity, right? Isa alayhi salam came to confirm the Torah. He came to confirm the Sharia. وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَةِ. I came to confirm what was before me, right? وَلِأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ. I'm going to make some things halal for you that was haram, right? He was going to make things easy for them. What happened in Christianity? Paul goes to Greece, right? And all of these polytheists there, and he says, I have this new religion. All you have to do is believe that this man died for your sins, and you no longer have to worry about the law, right? In other words, all the actions are gone. There's no Sharia left anymore in Christianity because of what Paul did, right? And so Islam, that's preserved. It's a deen of action, right? And we're going to talk about all of these different components in the upcoming weeks when we talk about Islam in detail. So the hadith continues, right? فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُسْأَلُ قَالَ صَدَقْتَ. The Prophet Muhammad says, this man whose his hands are on the thighs of the Prophet Muhammad, listening to the Prophet Muhammad, tell him about what Islam is, right? At the end of it, he says, you're right. That's what Islam is. Right? قَالَ صَدَقْتَ. He says, you're right. Okay? Then Umar, who's narrating this hadith, is like, عَجِبْنَا لَهُ يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُصَدِّقُهُ. It's strange. This man's asking what it is, and then he confirms that that's what it is. He's already kind of perplexed about who this guy is because he's got no signs of traveler, right? Very white clothing, which we said is symbolic. So he continues, he says, فَقَالَ أَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِيمَانِ. So tell me, what is faith? If that's what Islam is, what is faith? Okay, so notice there's a differentiation here between Islam and Iman, right? It's almost as if Iman is the next level. قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. They came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the A'rab, they said, we believe. We have Iman. Right? They would come to the Prophet Muhammad and make this claim. What does Allah say? قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. No. You have not achieved Iman yet. Right? قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُلُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. But you have achieved Islam. You've engaged in submission. You've engaged in Islam. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Right? But Iman has not yet entered your hearts. Allah says lamma. In the Arabic language, if you say lam, that's a negation for everything after and everything before. Right? If Allah said lam, that means you'll never have faith. But out of the mercy of Allah, Allah said walamma. Lamma means not yet. You don't have it now, but you'll have it in the future if you keep working at it. I.e., the ishara here is that Islam, the practice of Islam, and the continual engagement of Islam, these 5 things that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned, leads to Iman in the heart. Okay? But Iman doesn't come right away. Faith doesn't come right. And a lot of youth struggle with this. Like, why don't people keep talking about like this sweetness of faith that you can taste. I don't taste nothing, right? Where's your Islam? Are you praying on time? What about the intentions we talked about earlier, right? How's that going? Are you even intending anything? Or are your actions of worship robotic? They're all just habit by now, right? It's all just ada, right? And then who are you intending it for, right? Out of all these things of Islam that we mentioned, prayer, zakat, everything, right? Are you doing those on time? Are you intending things? Is it meaningful? Is it purposeful? Are you seeking the face of Allah? Iman begins to come after that, right? It's something that Allah puts directly into your heart, right? It's something Allah puts directly into your heart. And then what is that? قال Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he's asked about what Iman is, and tu'mina billah, that you believe in Allah, wa malaikatihi, wa kutubihi, wa rusulihi, wal yawmil akhir, wa tu'mina bil qadr, khayrihi wa sharrihi. It's that you believe in Allah, right? Again, we're not going to go into detail right now. We just want to talk about this hadith. But this hadith is going to be the basis for how we structure the next 14 weeks or so, okay? But when the Prophet talks about Iman, what faith is that first and foremost you believe in Allah, i.e. you believe that there is no God but Allah. There is no strength or power except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There's no force out there, not in Star Wars, not in this life, okay? Right? Except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no power in anything. There's nothing worthy of struggle, nothing worthy of worship, right? Allah is the first without any beginning. He's the last without every end. All of the majestic names and qualities of Allah is what we have to believe in. And negate everything other than that, right? And that we believe in His messengers, in His angels, right? And Allah has angels for everything. He has angels for revelation of Quran. Angels for taking the souls of men at the time of death. Angels that come to you when you're in your grave and ask you, who was your Lord? Who was your Prophet? What was your deen? There is an angel that is decreed to take every single raindrop to its point of destination. Angels are curious. They ask Allah questions. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَا يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدَّمَاء وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِهَا. Are you going to put in the earth someone who's going to shed blood, right, and cause corruption? And we praise you? They're curious. They have some kind of intellect. They have some kind of ability to ask questions. But they don't disobey Allah. They're made from light, right? And they do everything. لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. They don't disobey Allah in anything, and they do everything they're commanded to do. Allah's books. Allah has sent books to many messengers before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No book is preserved till this day other than the Quran. Every other book has either been lost or it's been corrupted to some extent, right? And all of his prophets, all of his messengers, the day of judgment, right? And qadar. We're going to talk about qadar in detail when we get to the fourth hadith. But notice he returns the verb, وَتُؤْمِن. And again, you believe in qadar, which is a point of emphasis, because qadar is one of the hardest things to deal with in faith. Destination. Knowing that everything that afflicts you was not meant to miss you. Everything that misses you was never meant to get to you, right? The pages have been dried, the pens have been lifted. It's the hardest thing to deal with. It's the hardest point of faith to deal with. But it is a part of faith. We're almost done. A few more minutes. And then he says, قَالَ صَدَقْتَ, right? And we're going to talk about all of these points in details, probably in 5 weeks or so, starting from now, when we begin to look at the hadith that deal with Iman. He says, so you're right. This man sitting with his hands on the thighs of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, you're right. That's what Iman is. So the hadith continues. And the man says, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِحْسَانِ. So tell me about Ihsan. What is Ihsan? Right? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ. Ihsan is generally translated as beauty or excellence, right? Perfection. It could be perfection in faith. Or it could be perfection in work. But in this point, he's talking about perfection in faith. That you worship Allah as if you see Him. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ. And if you don't see Him, يَرَاكَ. He sees you. So you worship Allah as if you are watching Allah, as if you see Allah, right? How perfect would your faith be? And if you can't, then you know that Allah is seeing you in everything that you do. Everything that you say, you know Allah is watching you. Everything that you think, Allah is aware of it. Everything that you plan, Allah is aware of it. Some people say, the way you read this part is that when you say, فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ, you stop. Then you say تَرَى. That changes the meaning. Because if you say, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَى, that you worship Allah as if you see Him. Alright? فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ, you stop here. That means, but if you cease to be, right? Tara, then you'll see Him. I.e., if your ego ceases to exist, right? Then you will see Him. Instead of saying فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ يَرَاكَ, right? And if you don't see Him, He sees you. It's the same words, but if you stop at a certain point, it changes the meaning. And so some people of tasawwuf, they'll say that this could be a potential meaning that, if you cease to be egotistic, right, then you could worship Allah as if you see Him. And this is what ihsan is. And this has the shortest description. Why? Because ihsan is not a formula. Ihsan is not a list of things to believe or a list of things to do. Ihsan is a state. It's a state of being. It's perfection, right? And it's something that you learn through experience. It's not something that you learn through a formula, okay? And tanawwar, this is what Ibn Rajab says, He says, أن تنور القلب بالإيمان وتنفذ البصيرة في العرفان حتى يسير الغيب كالعيان وهذه هي الحقيقة مقام الإحسان. Right? أن تنفذ البصيرة في العرفان. Right? That your eyes become sharp. Right? أن تنور القلب بالإيمان. Your heart becomes filled with light to the point in which your eyes become sharp. Right? And that which was invisible to you before, now it becomes visible. That things that you couldn't see before, now you begin to see very clearly. And this is the reality of the station of ihsan. This was the dua of the Prophet Muhammad. Arini al-ashya kama, he showed me things the way they really are. Right? This is what that's what ihsan is. Right? And so he says, that's what ihsan is, and it stops here. Right? Very, very short. Because again, we're going to talk about this in detail. This is going to be the last part of the course. But this is experiential. Right? This doesn't have a formula. This is learned through effort. It's learned through practice, right? And it's the highest level of the articulation of a faithful person, okay? And then he says, and now we're towards the end of the hadith, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ السَّاعَةِ. Tell me about the hour, right, in which the day of judgment comes. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, مَا الْمَسْئُولُ عَنْهَا بِأَعْلَمَ مِنَ السَّائِلِ. The one who's being asked, i.e. the Prophet Muhammad, knows no more than the asker. The one who's asking, i.e. this man with his hands on the thighs of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so the man now who's wearing a white clothing, very dark hair, says, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ أَمَارَاتِهَا. Now let's briefly talk about these. He says, so tell me about the signs of the hour, right? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentions two things. أَن تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. This is confusing for some people. That a slave woman gives birth to her master. We're going to talk about that, all right? Slave woman gives birth to a master, okay? وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالى رياء الشاء يتطاولون في البنيان. And that you see the barefoot حفاة العراة, naked, poor, destitute, shepherd, okay? Competing with each other and seeing who can build the tallest building. All right? He mentions two signs. Now, just to kind of put this in context. There are signs for the day of judgment, okay? There are major signs and there are minor signs. The major signs are 10. And this is well known in a particular hadith that the Prophet Muhammad says is the major signs of the day of judgment is that one, the Dajjal is going to come. You all heard of the Dajjal, right? The Dajjal is going to come, and with that will come the descent of Isa, the return of Isa alayhi salam, and the Mahdi will be here at that time as well, right? And Ya'juj and Ma'juj, this story is mentioned in Surah Kahf. حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, right? Dhul Qarnayn, who some people say is what, Alexander the Great, no one really knows who he was, but he's mentioned in Surah Kahf. He comes across this area. Some people, in their tafsir of geography, maybe between Armenia and Azerbaijan or something, he comes into this area. It's like a mountain pass, right? And the people complain that there's this tribe, these two tribes, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and some people say Ta'ajjuj means to spark a fire. So and Ma'juj comes from Moj, which is wave. Like these people had like destructive forces, like a wave or like fire spreading everywhere, right? And they complain to Dhul Qarnayn, that these people are spreading corruption in the earth. Help us build a seal over them, right? And Dhul Qarnayn does that, and until now they're kept up in that seal, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment that seal is going to break. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, whoever these forces are going to come out and cause corruption in the earth. That's another major sign, right? The sun rising from the west instead of the east. A smoke that will come down from the sky, envelop people and cause tremendous torment, right? Watch for the day when a smoke will come down from the sky and envelop people and cause a tremendous torment, right? That's a major sign. Another major sign is that there will be landslides in the east, major landslides in the east, in the west, and in the Arabian Peninsula, although that's not described in its entirety what exactly that's going to be. A beast will come, right? A beast will come onto the earth. إذا وقع القول عليهم أخرجنا لهم دابة من تكلمهم أن الناس كانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. Right? A beast will come that will speak to people and will brand people. It will be able to speak and it will brand people as believers or non-believers. Right? And another major sign is that a fire will come and cause people to gather in certain places, and the day of judgment will come after that. 10 or so major signs, right? These are well-known major signs. But then there's a ton of minor signs. The minor signs of the day of judgment are extremely numerous. We can't enumerate them here. But two of them are mentioned. Allah even says in the Quran, فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطُهَا. They have come, right? The ashrat or the amarat, right? They're the signs. فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطُهَا فَأَنَّا لَهُمْ إِذَا جَاءَتْهُمْ ذِكْرَهُم. So what's going to make them remember when it comes, right? And the Prophet Muhammad says, when me in the day of judgment are like this. And the Prophet Muhammad's coming is one of the minor signs as well. Right? And so the Prophet mentions two minor signs. A slave woman, these are two of the minor, not the major signs, minor signs. A slave woman will give birth to her master. Right? Different interpretations of what this means, but in general, when you look at all of the signs in general, what you see is that there's a trend. This is what Ibn Rajab says. There's a trend of in'ikas wal umur. Things are flipped. General things that we understand, the way things are supposed to be in society, they become flipped. Things that are known as good become bad. Knowledge is stripped from people. Ignorance takes the place of it. People who don't know what they're doing begin to do things that they shouldn't be doing. And here, what they say about this hadith is that a woman, she's not necessarily a slave woman when she gives birth, but she'll give birth to someone who will grow up and be so immoral and so poor akhlaq towards their parents and their mother that they will be treating their parents or their mother as if they were his or her slave. Telling them what to do. Go do this for me, go do that for me. No akhlaq, no adab, right? And it will be as if she is a slave giving birth to her master. Because everything becomes flipped. That's not the script. The normal script is that a child has adab towards their parents and they're grateful, right? And they're respectful, and they do what their parents tell them to do. But the minor sign is it flips. The child has an ego like there's no tomorrow. And the child tells the parent what to do. And the child says, no, you go do this, you go do that, you go do this, you do that. And it's as if the parent is a slave to the child. And تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. And then he says that you see the barefoot, poor, naked sheep herder competing in building buildings, right? Anyone here been to Dubai? Burj Al Khalifa, right? Anyone here been to it? I'll admit I've been to it. I just wanted to see it, There's nothing else to do there. You can go indoor skiing, but that's not that exciting either, right? So I've been to it, right? It's not that big of a deal, but it's like, what is going on? And then in Jeddah, what's that building called? they called it the mile high tower, but they couldn't make it a mile high. It's like a kilometer high. It's got a name.
Kingdom Tower.
Kingdom Tower, right? Competing with that. Competing with the people in UAE. Who can build the tallest building, right? Because what? In'ikasul umur. People who had no business being in government. They were originally just uneducated, poor, right? Don't come from any kind of political background or educated background or anything. All of a sudden inherit money. They don't know what to do with it. And they just, what do? They're bored. So they're just competing. Who can build the tallest building? Which is a complete waste of money, right? Because they're clueless as to what to do in terms of government. They could have spent that money in way better ways, right? But what the hadith is pointing to is not just political, it's not just like some kind of political grievance. The hadith is pointing to things become flipped. The people who should be in power are not. Instead, you have these shepherds who don't know anything about wealth or politics. All of a sudden, and then they begin to do stuff, right? So I wanted to mention that a little bit in detail because actually the rest of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi do not talk about the signs of the Day of Judgment. The rest are just about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So I wanted to mention those a little bit in detail. فانطلق فلبثت مليا, right? So this man leaves. فلبث مليا, and we waited for a second, right? ثم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا عمر أتدري من السائل? Oh Umar, do you know who this man was? قال الله ورسوله أعلم. Allah and His Messenger know best. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. This is Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion, right? Your religion. Let me say that again. Your religion. Dinakum, not your parents' religion. Your religion, okay? Which is composed of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And for the next 14 weeks or so, we're going to look at in bunches all of the hadith that deal with Islam, and we're going to talk about تقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت in detail. And we're going to look at all the hadith that talk about believing in Allah and His messengers and the decree and the Day of Judgment in detail. And we're going to look at all the hadith that talk about ihsan and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him, and perfection, right, and beauty. We're going to talk about those in detail as well. Until we gain what? A foundation, a good foundation. So let me stop here. And also, this is informal. If anyone wants to stop at any time and ask a question, feel free to stop at any time and ask a question. But right now, let's just stop and see if there's anyone wants to add something, take something away, ask a question, whatever. Floor's open. Bismillah.
The guy who came to teach us our tradition, our religion, what's his name?
He said, "Innahu Jibreel." This was Jibreel. So Jibreel is an angel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the angel entrusted with tanzilul wahi, the bringing of revelation, right? And Jibreel would come to the Prophet Muhammad sometimes in his actual form, which would fill the horizon. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Allamahu shadidul quwa." Shadidul quwa. The one who is intense in his power taught the Prophet Muhammad. Why? Because when you look out in the horizon, it's big. And Jibreel would fill that with his wings. Jibreel is huge. Jibreel is very powerful, okay? So sometimes he would come in his actual form. And that's how he first came to the Prophet Muhammad, when he said, "Iqra." Sometimes he would come in the form of a man. And this is usually how he would come, right? Shadidu bayad thiyab, shadidu sawad sha'r. He would come in white clothing, dark hair, like someone dressed very well, right? And so this is Jibreel coming in the form of a man. Good. Any other questions? Comments?
Could be about this, could be about anything else.
No.
We have a new Muslims here, so if you
Oh,
could just
okay.
basically explain, the four men, angels, and in terms of like, so they know, what angels are different, or what are the men responsibility, and who is the more famous one among all the angels.
There are main angels that are talked about. Mikael is talked about. Michael, Jibril is talked about. Jibril's main role is the sending of revelation, right? And not just to the Prophet Muhammad, but to all the prophets before, right? To Jesus, to David, to Moses. When the Prophet Muhammad first received revelation, right? And he told Khadija said, let's go to Waqa bin Nawfal, my cousin, because he's familiar with the scriptures of Ahlul Kitab. And when he told Waraqa bin Nawfal what happened, you know what Waraqa bin Nawfal said? He said, this is the Namus. Namus in the Hebrew meant the angel Gabriel, right? So he recognized it immediately. This is the same angel that came to Moses with the revelation to Moses, right? Israfil is the angel that's going to blow the trumpet on the Day of Judgment. And in general, there are angels that will come and ask you questions when you die, and you're in your grave. In fact, three questions that they will ask you, right? Who was your deen? Who was your Lord? Who was your prophet? Right? Your ability to answer those questions is not like memorization. You can't memorize the answer. Your ability to answer those questions is the degree to which you implemented it in this life. And so if you didn't implement it well, you'll struggle to answer the question correctly. And how you answer the question is going to determine how you're treated in the grave until the Day of Judgment. The angels have many roles. We're going to talk about the angels in detail in next week's class. So I want to save that for next week's class because we're going to talk about all the ahadith that deal with Islam, and some of that's going to do with angels. Who's the new convert? Oh, okay, mashallah. What's your name, brother?
Richmond Bay.
Richmond, okay.
My sister in the back too.
Oh, okay, mashallah.
No. Oh.
And feel free to ask any questions. One of the things the Prophet Muhammad says, La haya fi din. What does that mean? That there's no modesty in deen? No. There's no shyness when it comes to seeking knowledge, right? So if there's a question you don't know, you have to ask in order to help yourself understand better, especially if it's something that will help you practice the religion better, And I may not know the answer, and if I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know, but inshallah, I'll do my best to find out.
Can you repeat the two hadiths that you started with?
Yeah, so
the second one.
Yeah.
The Arabic form.
Yeah, so the first hadith is, just to go through and just translate it, say it again and translate it as a summary. So the first hadith is by Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he says that the Prophet Muhammad says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, indeed, verily actions are considered, or they're authentic, or they're correct, or they're accepted only by virtue of their intentions. Okay? وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, and every person will have, in accordance to their action, what their intention was. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So whoever migrated for Allah, made a migration, like left one place to go to another place, right? Traveled, made a migration of some sort, then that migration is for Allah and His Messenger. If that's what they intended, that's the reward that they will have. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِلدُّنْيَا يُصِيبَهَا وَامْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. And whoever's migration was for some materialistic purpose, to acquire something of this dunya. Dunya means worldly affair, right? وَامْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا, or a woman to marry, or it could be for a woman and man to marry, same thing applies, right? Then they will have that. That will be what because that was what they were intending. Your actions are just by your intentions, right? The second hadith is going back and saying, as a translation one more time, Umar, again, is narrating the hadith. Umar is one of the more famous companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He's the second Khalifa of Islam after the Prophet Muhammad, right? Second major political and spiritual leader figure of Islam after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who ruled for 10 years in his caliphate, and Islam spread all the way from Iran to Jerusalem during that time. So Umar is a significant figure, and he's narrating both of these hadith that we mentioned here today. And he says, بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. One day when we were all sitting around the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر. A man came upon us out of nowhere, very white in his clothes, very dark in his hair. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرف منا أحد. We didn't see any sign of travel on this person. No one knew who he was, right? فجلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he sat in front of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه. He put his knees on, touching the knees of the Prophet Muhammad. ووضع كفيه على فخذيه. He took his palms and he put it on the thighs of the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. فقال أخبرني عن الإسلام. And at that moment he asked the Prophet Muhammad, in front of all these people now, what is Islam? What is Islam? فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله. Islam is that you bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. وتقيم الصلاة تؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. Right? And that you establish the prayer. Establish the prayer. Right? You give the charity. You fast the fast of Ramadan, and you go to Hajj if you're able to. Right? قال صدقت. The man who's sitting says, you've told the truth. Right? Umar, who's narrating the hadith, says, فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُصَدِّقُهُ. We found it weird that he would ask him what Islam is, and then he would confirm that he was correct in his answer. Right? فقال أخبرني عن الإيمان. So he says, tell me about Iman. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإيمان وأن تؤمن بالله. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that Iman is that you believe in Allah, وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ, and that you believe in His angels, you believe in His books, you believe in all of His prophets and messengers, right? وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, and the day of judgment, وَتُؤْمِن, and that you believe in predestination, خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ, the good of predestination and the bad of predestination. قَالَ صَدَقْتِ. The man whose thighs are touching the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his palms are on his thighs, he says, you've told the truth, that's what it is. That's what faith is, right? قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. So he says, tell me what Ihsan is. Ihsan, perfection in religion, right? Tell me what Ihsan is. The Prophet Muhammad says, Ihsan, perfection in religion, and تعبد الله كأنك تراه, is that you worship Allah as if you see Allah. فإن لم تكن تراه يراك. And if you don't see Him, know that He sees you. قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. Then this man says, okay, tell me about the hour, meaning the hour in which the day of judgment is coming, right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. The one who's being asked, i.e. me, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, knows no more than the one who's asking, i.e. you, the person whose thighs is touching my thigh, right? So the man says, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ أَمَارَاتِهَا. Then tell me some of its portents and signs, right? فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم أَنْ تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. That a slave woman would give birth to her master. وَأَنْ تَرَى الْهُفَاةَ الْعُرَاةَ الْعَالَى رِيَعَ أَشَّاءِ يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. And that you would see the barefoot, naked, poor sheep herder competing with one another in building tall buildings. ثُمَّ انْطَلَقَا. Then the man left. فَلَبِثْنَا مَلِيًّا. And we waited for a while. ثُمَّ قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتدري من السائل. Do you know who this questioner was? قال عمر الله ورسوله أعلم. Umar رضي الله عنه says, Allah and His Messenger know best. قال إنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. This was Jibreel, the angel Jibreel, the angel Gabriel. He has come to teach you your religion. And the hadith ends there. So these are the two hadith. Any more questions? So now, the next few weeks, we're going to look at the rest of the various ahadith in these 40 hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that Imam Nawawi compiled. that deal with this definition of Islam that the Prophet Muhammad gave to the angel Gabriel, al-Islamu an tashhad an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, that are similar to this hadith, right? And we're going to talk about these various components of Islam in more detail in the next few weeks, inshallah. So stay tuned.
Just a small, brief description about the books that you have, if you can provide. Does it capture the 40 hadiths that you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know of any English. If anyone wants an English, just mention
Jamal Zarbozo.
Zarbuzu has a commentary. I'm not familiar with it. Mostly what I'm using is Ibn Rajab. Ibn Rajab, Jami' Ulum wal Hikam. I read it beforehand. I'm not going to read during the halaqah. Ibn Rajab is a 13th century or so, well, originally Iraqi, died in Syria, scholar of the Hanbali madhab, who was about less than 100 years or so after Imam Nawawi. Wrote the commentary after Imam Nawawi. And it's a commentary on all of the 40 ahadith, and it's called Jami'ul Ulum wal Hikam, the compository of sciences and wisdom. Because with every single hadith, he goes into detail on all the different various ways it's relevant to fiqh and aqidah and so on and so forth. And this is the primary book I'm using. This is a contemporary book, Al-Wafi, by a scholar called Mustafa Bugha, PhD scholar. So a contemporary work that looks at books like this and just summarizes it. You know, so this is not that big of a deal. This is really what most people use and return to. These are in Arabic. I'm not familiar with the English sources. If there's good English sources, some people can give recommendations. But these are what I'm using. Yeah. So. Khair. بارك الله فيكم جزاكم الله خيرا انفعنا بما قرأنا وجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
والإكرام